Good afternoon, Facebook. Welcome to Ask an Ecologist. This is our fourth segment. And just a reminder, you can submit questions to Ask an Ecologist every week by commenting, sending us a Facebook message, or sending us an email at info@bayouland.org if you'd like to get your question answered. This is certainly the warmest version of Ask an Ecologist that I've done so far, but we're going to get through it. We should have some cooler weather on the way next week, and that'll be good. Again, my name is Suzanne Simpson. I am the Land Stewardship Director and an ecologist for Bayou Land Conservancy. So let's get to your questions. Question number 1 was submitted by Lisa Lynn, who sent me a picture of a bee that she had found in near her house that was cut in half, and it was in the proximity of a wasp nest. And her question was, can wasps kill bees? Well, the answer is yes. Yellow jackets are probably most known for this behavior, though it's also been recorded in paper wasps. And the reasoning behind it is that wasp larvae are carnivorous. So adult wasps will attack bees and usually separate the thorax and then take that back to their nest in order to feed their young. So it is possible, Lisa, that the bee that you saw killed by the wasp nest was in fact killed by wasps. Thank you for the question. Our next question was submitted by Pat Simpson, who is certainly best known by me for being my mom. And she asked first, I used to see dragonflies around my house in Kingwood, but then they went away. Now they're back. What happened? Well, first, a quick note on dragonflies. Dragonflies should really be the mascot of Houstonians because in their larval stage, they are voracious eaters of mosquitoes. They will eat twice their weight in mosquitoes every single day. So next time you're walking around a trail, give a thank you to a dragonfly for doing its part to keep our mosquito populations down. Now, dragonflies are unique among insects because they have a long lifespan and they have low population densities. And what that means is that they're more sensitive to disturbances in their habitats. So one of the leading causes of reductions of dragonfly populations globally is the loss of wetland habitat. And that's certainly something that could be affecting the dragonfly populations as locally as your own backyard. Another contribution to a reduction in dragonfly populations is the use of pesticides and even insecticides, which can build up to toxic concentrations and end up killing dragonfly populations. So I'm glad you're seeing a rebound in them. It'll be interesting to see if you're noticing them again next year, and hopefully they found a new home, a new old home out in Kingwood. The second question submitted by Pat Simpson was, what is the better pollinator, wasps or bees? Well, I can tell you that wasps are important pollinators, but bees are by far the more efficient pollinator, and that's because they have hairs on their abdomen, on their body that attract pollen. They also submit an electromagnetic pulse that attracts pollen to their body. So bees are the more effective pollinator. The wasps are important too. And thank you for the question. Give my best to Dad. Jill Bouillon asked, I saw a monarch butterfly in my native pollinator garden, and later I saw a bee. It had me wondering, is there enough pollen to go around, and can plants run out of pollen? Really good question. The two taxa that you named, butterflies and bees, are really most interested in the nectar of a plant rather than the pollen. Bees will cover themselves in pollen and bring that back to their hives to feed their larvae, but butterflies especially are really only in this for the nectar. And that is the limiting resource for a plant more than pollen. Plants can run out of nectar more easily than they would ever run out of pollen. Luckily, plants have structures called nectaries, which are able to replenish the nectar sources and allow pollinators to come back and feed on that again. How long it takes for that to be replenished is dependent upon the flower, and that's another good reason to have a variety of native plants in your garden so that if one plant's running kind of low, another one can jump in and supplement. An interesting note about pollinator behavior is studies have shown that if given the choice, bees will favor flowers that produce more consistent nectar loads rather than boom or bust nectar flowers. So even if the overall nectar production of a flower is lower than another, if it's more consistent, bees like that consistency and will favor that over a lot of nectar or very little nectar. That's an interesting note. Okay, a topic I wanted to talk about is spring migration and fallout. So during this time of quarantine, a lot of us, myself included, are sort of becoming backyard birders. And this is a time of year where you may be seeing new species coming to your feeder. And that's because we are entering the peak of spring migration. We are in the midst of a very important flyway here, really, too. We're along the Mississippi and the central flyways here in Houston. And a phenomenon that can happen along the coast sometimes when conditions are right is when these birds that have been wintering in Central and South America are moving upwards in order to establish a breeding site and raise a family, is a storm can hit the Gulf of Mexico at the appropriate time. And under this set of conditions, a phenomenon called fallout can occur, where the storm tosses the birds around. It causes a lot of energy usage. The birds become exhausted and they're forced to take shelter on the nearest land mass that they possibly can. And so as a result, you will see thousands of different species of birds falling onto our coastal sanctuaries, and birders everywhere will globally will flock literally to these areas to be able to see all these different species of birds. It's been said that there are more species of birds in those sanctuaries at that time than there are on thousands of acres of Appalachian forest. So the biodiversity is incredible. And so if you are gaining an interest in birding, especially during this time as you're spending more time in your backyard learning the species that are near you, I highly recommend that next year you plan a visit to the High Island Sanctuary that is stewarded by our friends at the Houston Audubon. They do a great job protecting critical bird habitat along the coast. And you may end up seeing a species that is incredibly rare, that you would never get to see under any other set of circumstances, but we're so close to that resource in Houston that it's pretty incredible that we have that access to so many different species. And lastly, I wanted to leave you with this thought. The majority of the city of Houston used to be a vast, tall grass coastal prairie. And coastal prairies are fascinating ecosystems because they are dependent upon disturbance regimes, disturbance from fire, disturbance from grazing that prevents woody vegetation from encroaching on the grasslands and allowing them to remain prairie. And these disturbance regimes increase the resilience, the sustainability, and the diversity of prairies. And I think all of us at home now are kind of going through our own disturbance regime. And it's difficult to put too much of a silver lining on what we're all experiencing every day right now. But I hope that we will all emerge from this disturbance regime feeling more connected, feeling more resilient, more sustainable, and a greater sense of community. So I'll leave you with that thought. Please submit your questions, and thank you so much for tuning in for Ask an Ecologist. I'm Suzanne Simpson.